Hey everybody, so I want to talk about addressing your long-term care plan and just doing some basic logic on this one. So this is a big part of thriving in retirement, knowing that you have a plan because it's going to help with that mental block of spending money, right? Some people just won't spend their savings because they're worried about paying for long-term care. So we got to look at this logically. We have to take a step back and look at your own situation. And I'm going to recommend different things based on different ages. And so I'll talk through this and this will be a great little starter, but everybody needs some form of a plan. All right. So first, the cost of long-term care. Okay. Depends on where you are in the country. Arizona's pretty close to the median. That's we're right in the smack dab middle of the cost parameters. Some of our costs are a little higher, some of them are a little lower. We're one of the dark red states. Not really. You compare us to the average numbers, we're not bad. Now, we have to recognize the baby boomers are getting older. 79 years old right now. Congratulations. Well, that means these long-term care facilities are ramping up. We're going to start seeing longer lines, longer wait lists, and some people are going to want to be more proactive than others. So looking at this cost parameter, understand it depends on where you are. If you're in Alaska, I'm so sorry, you're going to want to move out before you need to go into long-term care. Not very many facilities in Alaska, and they have the nation highest averaged at $24,000 a month. That's expensive. But the surprising one that has creeped up very quickly here is that northern Midwest area there. We've got the North Dakota edging over 10,000 a month on average right now. Minnesota's been high for a while, but now they're getting beat by Wisconsin and Michigan. So understand that if you're up there, you're going to have to get ready for some higher costs. I think we all knew the Northeast was going to be quite expensive, and certainly the West Coast trends higher from an expense standpoint. We've seen pretty steady, stable, lower costs in the South, and that's pretty normal. So also understand there's different types of care: in-home care, assisted living, full-blown nursing home. People don't spend a huge amount of time in full-blown nursing home care, and that's usually the big scary numbers that you see out there. The outliers, the situations when we do see people in an extended period of time at that high level of care is things like my mother-in-law with Alzheimer's, over 10 years in full-blown long-term care. So some of the cognitive memory issues, you're going to need that type of higher level care for a longer period of time, but it's very hard to prepare for that type of an expense. 10 years plus at 10,000 a month plus. That's quite hard to cover with a product or imagine your own wealth and situation covering. So we have to be logical about this. We have to understand the cost parameters. That's going to be the first part of this, because as these baby boomers, as you guys getting older and older and older, you're going to start filling up these facilities. And we've seen a lot of wait lists already. The place my mother-in-law's in has always had a wait list. So the good places, the nice places typically do. All right, so we want you to think logically, know your surroundings and the array of facilities and cost parameters, right? I hear outlandish thoughts in people's heads of how much things cost when it comes to long-term care. I've heard people tell me it costs over $20,000 a month when I live here in Arizona, and we have everything from $2,000-3,000 a month on up to $20,000 a month. So rocketing right to the highest cost place that's literally a resort with people waiting on you hand and foot. It's not really necessarily logical. You're a multi millionaire and you want to go stay there and put the million up front. I don't have a problem with that. Go for that. But that doesn't mean that's what it costs. My mother-in-law's in a fantastic facility, and she's been there for about 10 years. And we started out at $6,000 a month, and that's at full-blown care there. And we love it. I would put myself in there. It's a fantastic facility. And that's saying a lot considering I've seen so many different types of facilities out there. So I typically say, look, late 70s, depending on your health, obviously, late 70s is a good time to get out and actually go into these facilities in your area. You want to stay in familiar territory. Some people say they want to move back closer to their family, things like that. That's fine, but make sure you actually walk through a few of these facilities and get an idea of what it costs where you want to be. One of the biggest blessings for my mother-in-law was when my wife was taking her around. When she walked into the facility that she's in, she actually just flat out said, "Oh, I like this place. I want to be here." And that took such a relief off of us, and especially my wife. That was a big blessing. We still look back at that and say that was the help we needed. It was so hard to put mom into a facility. But when she said, "Oh, this is the place I want to be," that really, really, really helps. So the other part of this is knowing the difference between assisted living and a nursing home. Again, when you have Alzheimer's, you need full-blown 24/7 care, but not everybody is in that situation. The vast majority of people are not in that situation. Typically, when you are single, whether it's widowed or single, if you don't have family around you, close family that's there to support and help and be there when you need them, then you're going to need to be more proactive, and that becomes very important. So, assisted living is a great proactive way to do this. It's just being in a community that does have that support, that does have the ability to help out when you need it. So one of the most popular places here in Arizona for assisted living, I mean, heck, you can get a place in there for less than $4,000 a month. So understanding the cost parameters, a lot of people can afford assisted living, but they hear long-term care and they don't realize that assisted living is really just a glorified apartment. Or a condo essentially is what you're getting into. Some of these places ask for big chunks of money up front. Some don't. Some cap the cost of living adjustment and the raise in rent. Some don't. So you do have to look at these things and be careful about your choices that are out there. Just know that some of these places are high pressure sales. They want to get you on their wait list. They want to sell you on why you got to get moved in right away. So just be careful about that. Understand that the people you typically meet with to tour a facility or ask about the costs of the facility or the resources and all that stuff, they're typically going to be salespeople. So just know that going in and be careful about that. So the next thing that I find very important is understanding your own personal resources, starting with income. When people talk about covering long-term care, they worry about the whole bill. And so I've, in this scenario, I've put $10,000 a month. Now, again, if you're going into assisted living and it's only $3,500 a month, that's a whole different parameter. But I want to show you, if you have to move into full-blown long-term care and you're going to need 24/7 care, cognitive issues, things like that. Well, 10,000 a month is going to be pretty normal for a full memory care type facility. Well, okay, if your Social Security is 3,000 a month and maybe you got a $2,000 pension, then all you really need to cover, your resources need to cover is 5,000 a month. And that sounds like a lot. Oh, that's a lot of money. Well, I get it. I get it. But you have hopefully resources. One, what about the house that you no longer live in? Now, in some cases, the scenario might be rent the house out. I had a family that was the local here. Mom needed to go into long-term care, but they wanted to keep the house in the family. And the son in this case was experienced as a property manager. And I said, well, rent that place out. And they actually turned it into a short, I call it midterm rental, month plus long rental. And they've been knocking it off the planet, and they've used that to help pay for mom's long-term care, and it's worked out fantastic. So think about your resources. Once you've figured out your coverage need, right? The difference between your income and the cost of the facility. Because if you're in full-blown long-term care, you don't really need other money. Everything's taken care of in there, food, everything. Maybe you want, haircut, nails done, stuff like that. That's fine. The small ancillary costs, occasional. Then look at your house value. In this case, I put $500,000 house value and savings of 500,000. That's $1 million in resources. Well, you take the $5,000 a month you need to cover that your income doesn't cover, divide it by, or divide it into the $1 million. You have 200 months of coverage. 10 years is only 120 months. That's longer than my mother-in-law's needed it. And that's the extreme of all extremes. I mean, they say Alzheimer's patients are usually, I think the average is up to about 9 years. Well, my mother-in-law's eclipsed that significantly. So understand that it's hard to cover the extremes, but in a case like this, I've seen people in this exact scenario that don't think they can afford to pay for long-term care. And I look at this and say, you self-insure. There's no question you self-insure. This is a very simple case of self-insuring. You can afford to pay for long-term care yourself. And in the most extreme situation, you can. So it's important to have this perspective. For some reason, it's emotional. We put our blinders on to what our actual resources are. So when I see somebody with 5,000 a month income, I'm saying that's a huge leg up. If you go into assisted living, you're pretty fantastic. There's some great assisted living facilities out there at $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month. And then you still have all these resources. And that calculated this without earning anything. Earn a 4% yield on a $1 million portfolio. That's still 40,000 worth of ancillary money without touching the principal. That's just a simple 4% calculation. You can certainly put it in CDs, a dividend portfolio, whatever it is that you need, and have lots of ancillary money to enjoy retirement in an assisted living facility. So, and still have plenty of resources when you need upgraded care and a higher cost. So part of this exercise is really getting familiar with yourself and your own resources and getting comfortable with how you would actually fund long-term care. But there's still a decision tree to kind of consider here. So what about products? There's so many people out there that fear people into buying products, and I'm never a fan of that. I want to have a plan. I want to know why we're using this. And so there are some people I would recommend considering products, considering adding a product to your situation. So the first question I start with is the self-insuring, assessing whether you self-insure. Are you going to be able to afford it or not? And some people would say, well, if you self-insure, you don't need a product. And it's actually completely opposite of that. It's very strangely opposite of that, because there's one more question I have to ask. If yes, you do self-insure, then I really want to know, how much do you care about what you're leaving to your heirs? Because if you self-insure, if you have plenty of resources to pay for your own long-term care, but you don't care about what your heirs get, then you probably don't need the product. But if you do care how much your heirs get, then yes, you should be considering a product, something to help out to leverage the existing savings to protect this money for your heirs, right? Because you self-insure, but if you run through all that savings or a good chunk of that savings, your heirs aren't going to get very much. Whereas if you buy something that protects you from using up all that money, and that gets used first before you dip into your own savings, then you're protecting this wealth for your heirs. And that's the thing you're considering when you do self-insure. Do you want to help protect what you have so you can leave your heirs as much as possible? And there's some great products out there. So then we get to the gray area. This is the difficult one. This is where it's not always a very clear answer to me. And if you don't self-insure, if you don't have the money, the resources, the income to pay for your own long-term care, it becomes a lot more difficult. Okay? You can't afford coverage. Well, then you need to learn the rules of Medicaid in your state. Some states use the federal Medicaid. Some states have their own, like here in Arizona, we have All-Tex. So we do need to make sure we understand the rules. So instead of laboring over, should I try and pay, which I met a couple that were pinching pennies together, ruining their good years in retirement just to pay for a policy that wasn't going to cover their needs. They were going to end up on Medicaid anyways. And why pay for these policies and ruin your fun years, your go-go years, just to scrape together some pennies to pay for this policy that it's not going to do much for you? Okay, so I hate to see people doing that to themselves. If you can't afford coverage and it's not protecting you from anything, then why are we paying for it? You need to understand Medicaid. You also need to surround yourself with resources so you spend less time in long-term care. You need to have family close. You need to, keep friends and family near you. Make choices that allow you to stay out of long-term care. But then there's the, yes, I can afford coverage. Maybe you got halfway decent income. Maybe you have some extra resources and you want to leverage them up. There are scenarios where you don't self-insure, but you could afford coverage, because there's lots of different choices, as we'll see on the next slide. Then maybe that's when you start considering it. So that way you're in control of long-term care instead of just going wherever they'll take you. Right? Because if you can pay for it, any place will take you. But if you can't pay for it and you have to rely on Medicaid, not every place is going to accept you. Okay? So the products. Well, the first thing is, again, if you self-insure, adjusting your portfolio. Again, sometimes using the house as a rental property can work out. If you have, kids that live in the area and that are willing to manage it, they can increase the yield from that part of your net worth that pays for long-term care. It works out great for everybody, right? But also adjusting the portfolio, making sure we adjust it to an income-producing portfolio, produce yield, okay? Whether it's CDs or MYGAs or dividend portfolios or things like that. We want to produce income so we're not chewing away at that principal, okay? So adjusting the portfolio becomes very important. Now, from a product standpoint, in order, the first thing I would look at nowadays is life insurance. Life insurance by far is the best place to go to cover long-term care. And the cool thing is if you don't need long-term care, your heirs get a tax-free death benefit. So instead of the old school pay-as-you-go, what we call a risk insurance, all you're doing is paying to cover that risk. If you die and don't need long-term care, nobody gets anything. It was a big waste of money. We don't like that. Look at how much you've paid for homeowners insurance or auto insurance and never had claims. Some of you have had one big claim in your life, but the reality is we do everything not to file claims because they're going to raise our rates. We don't like that kind of insurance. Whereas life insurance, death is inevitable. They know they have to pay out, and they have received tax benefits from our government to pay it out before you pass away. So that's the great thing about life insurance now. And a lot of this life insurance that covers long-term care is still underwritten as life insurance. So women get cheaper life insurance because they live longer, yet the vast majority of people in long-term care are women. It's over 70% of long-term care recipients are women. So this is a perfect storm of wonderfulness. If you're going to look at products, if you qualify for life insurance, people that are healthy in their 60s, that's the first place you're going to look. Okay. Now, if you're not healthy enough for life insurance, annuities have the next best up. Okay. Now, some of these annuities, these aren't the dinner seminar annuities. There are some that have this light underwriting, the absolute minimum, the one that's really great out there right now. You get on a video call. This is the entirety of their medical assessment. You get on a video call, they make you stand up and sit down like 5 times, they ask you some cognitive questions, and they run through your medical records, and that's it. That's it. It's pretty quick and easy, and it's one of the lightest, easiest underwriting I've ever seen. And they do it just simply to qualify it as a medically underwritten annuity so they can pay the long-term care benefits out tax-free. That's the whole reason they do it. And it's really a product designed like those dinner seminar annuities. It's an income annuity that you're going to trigger the income when you're in long-term care, and it's going to pay out a higher rate once you're in long-term care. And these can be used in a great way in a portfolio, especially with, hidden away CD money that I'm just waiting to see if I need it. Because this is, again, one of those situations. If you didn't need all that money, it goes to your heirs. It's never a waste of money, unlike the traditional long-term care insurance that we were paying for, right? And then there's also the annuity world that is not underwritten. Some people, I see people come into my office all the time. Here's what I have. And I'll find one of those, oops, I went to a dinner seminar and I bought one of those income annuities. They guaranteed me 7% growth. I thought it was fantastic. And then we realized, well, that growth's not real. Well, sometimes you can use those in a portfolio to cover long-term care. And I actually have a handful of clients that had one of those types of products out there, and we've doubled the income. It's fantastic. It works out real easy. You just get the doctor to sign off that you need help with 2 of the 6 activities of daily living, and all of a sudden you've got a nice boost for long-term care. And that's working out really well. So some of these products that got sold to people under false pretenses can get moved around into a plan and used properly, and they actually work out. So if you're sitting on a dead asset that you didn't think, maybe you bought it and didn't really know what it was, sometimes if with somebody that knows how to use those things, you can rearrange the portfolio planning and use it for long-term care, and it works out great. So the annuity world can help out quite a bit. And again, that's kind of secondary to the life insurance. It's a close second. And sometimes it's a first based on the situation. And then worst case scenario, last case scenario, the last thing I would ever look at from a product standpoint is that traditional long-term care insurance. First of all, it's use it or lose it. If you didn't end up needing long-term care, you lose all the money. And sure, are there some that say that's return of premium? Yeah, but it's usually return of premium minus cost of unknown amounts, things like that. But you have to pay for that. So you're getting return of premium, but you're paying more for it. So just be careful about some of that type of stuff. It is, for the most part, use it or lose it. And there's only a handful of companies out there issuing long-term care and traditional long-term care insurance. So there's not much left out there. So there's not good competition, which typically makes better products. There's worse products, and they can change the terms on you. So that's been the huge problem with traditional long-term care insurance. They can change the terms on you. Whereas annuity and life insurance, once you're paid up, you're done, you're fine. So just understand that it's just a much better experience for people with the life insurance and annuities. And we're just now seeing the people that got some of this stuff entering long-term care and using it, and it's working out so much better. Such a huge fight to get money out of these traditional long-term care insurance policies, because they know the longer they drag their feet, the less they're going to have to pay out. Whereas life insurance, you pass away, they got to pay out all the money. Annuities, the same thing. So they already know they have to pay it out. It's already built in. Whereas traditional long-term care insurance, they can go and never pay out and keep all the money. So always look at the life insurance and annuity products before you go look at this traditional long-term care. There's a lot of people that are getting out of these traditional long-term care insurance products, rearranging things, coming up with a plan, and utilizing the life insurance and annuity. So open the minds, consider these things. You should be addressing this. I'm a fan of at least talking through this in your 60s. Certainly addressing it in your 70s, and then being ready for it in your 80s. Okay, be ready for it. Again, the biggest blessing that my wife got was when my mother-in-law said, "This is the place I want to be here." It took such a huge relief off her shoulders, weight off her shoulders. That helped her a tremendous amount. So do that for your heirs. Do that for whoever's going to be making decisions for you. I know that for a lot of people, this is the hard part. Right? We think we're going to be fine, sound mind, take care of our own things. Well, at some point, a lot of people need somebody else to jump in and help out with this stuff. So just be prepared for that. All right, I hope this helps. This opens up the conversations. This is definitely a little tiny part of retirement planning, but it is an essential part for a lot of people. I have tons of experience with it with my mother-in-law, my grandfather, my great aunt. I've had a lot of hands-on experience in my own family life, but obviously as my clientele ages, we're seeing so much more of this in their cases too. It's very important to be as efficient as you can with your situation and making sure that you have a plan. And again, thinking through this and getting an outline in your 60s is a good idea, because the products are going to be a lot more friendly to you in your 60s. 70s, the products start pulling back and aren't going to be as good. So it's definitely something to think about and work through. I hope that helped. I hope that starts the conversations. Certainly, if you want to talk to me about all this stuff, yourinvestmentcounselor.com. You can jump right on there and schedule a free meet and greet with me, or go straight to an hourly appointment. Full classes. If you haven't found our full classes, I do a whole class on this, and it's actually up right now. FPFEAZ.org is our nonprofit organization we do full education in. Also, check out our main website, sesweb.net. You'll find a copy of the long-term care class on there if you don't find it on our nonprofit page. Certainly give us a call, smash that like button, share this with friends and family, open that conversation, and we'll see you next week. Thanks again, everybody.